Good evening, everyone. I'll call this meeting to order at 6:01. Remind everyone to please silence cell phones and other electronic devices, and remind council that the use of such devices are forbidden during committee meetings. It is, as I said, 6 o'clock. Call this meeting to order. I acknowledge that we are meeting on lands that have been inhabited from the beginning by Indigenous communities. As we budget for Brighton, we also look to live into right relations with Indigenous friends and communities, in particular our neighbors of the Alderville First Nation, with whom we endeavor to be partnered on an ongoing basis. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Wright, that the January 29th, 2024 Committee of the Whole meeting agenda be approved as presented. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being any opposed? Motion's carried. Are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? And if so, please state the general nature thereof. Councillor Butwell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. For the purposes of budget deliberations, I am the landlord for Gift from the Heart, an applicant for grant in aid.
Thank you. Anyone else? I have two declarations this evening. The first, I declare a disqualifying interest in an item listed on 7.2 of today's agenda, specifically the grants and aid request for the Hilton Cemetery. Trinity-St. Andrews United Church is the owner and operator of the Hilton Cemetery. I am a member of the Trinity-St. Andrews United Church Council. The church has a pecuniary interest in the grant and aid for the cemetery, and I will therefore recuse myself from any discussions or decisions as they relate to the request from the Hilton Cemetery and other private cemeteries in the community. I'm also declaring a non-disqualifying interest for item 8.2, letters of support of the Rainbow Youth Center grant application from the congregation of Trinity-St. Andrews United Church. The Integrity Commissioner has advised me that I may participate in the matter so long as the following disclosure is made. I am a member of the Trinity-St. Andrews United Church Council. The Affirm and Equity Committee of the church has submitted a letter of support to a grant for the Rainbow Youth Center noted in the grants and aid budget items. The church has no pecuniary interest in the matter before council, and in addition, I am not bound by the committee's letter or any position the church may have or will take in the matter. And for council's information, I have filed these disclosures with the clerk's office through the online portal via iCompass. Anyone else? We have no delegations this evening, which brings us to citizens' comment. Madam Clerk, are you aware of any citizens' comments? Thank you. And now on to staff reports. First report is from Mr. Hagerman with regard to the shed at King Ed vendor fee changes 2024. Mr. Hagerman, we've read your report. Do you have anything to add or highlight, sir?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to add that I put a amended version of the attachment on all of council and your desk prior to the meeting. We just found a couple errors in the attachment this afternoon and wanted to correct them.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Wheeldon, seconded by Councillor Wright, that the staff report, the shed at King Ed vendor fee charges 2024 season, be received for information and use the report for supplemental information as it relates to the economic development budget. New fee structure will be part of an amended fees and charges schedule. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? There being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to 7.2, 2024 draft budget. And perhaps I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Castleman and Mr. Puffer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're going to do a bit of a tag team discussion tonight. I'll lead the way with respect to an overview of where we've come from and where we are today. And then I'm going to pass it on to the relevant managers and our department heads to speak specifically to their operational budget and try and field any questions that may be forthcoming. So let's chat a little bit about where we've been and where we've come from. We last looked at the operating budget on November the 27th. And if you recall back then, we were looking at a tax levy increase of about 3.82%. What's happened since then? Well, on the 27th, we turned our mind to all of the grants and aid and made some decisions in that regard. The policy directive is that we allocate 1.5% towards grants and aid. So we went about doing just that. We did not allocate all of the funds on the 27th. We still have a residual of a little north of $36,000. So you still have a few dollars left to allocate. For your convenience, within the budget document tonight, I've listed the grants and aid that were requested and the grants and aid that were approved by council back on the 27th. So that's issue number one. Subsequently, I had an opportunity to meet with council on January the 8th, and we talked about a number of organizational changes that we deemed appropriate, or certainly I deemed appropriate as a CAO, and made a number of different recommendations to council for their consideration. Secondly, we talked about the KPMG study, where we established a new cultural plan for our municipality. And we talked about a number of different recommendations that flowed out of that KPMG study. In particular, a compensation review as a means of retaining and recruiting of staff members. We had retained the services of ML Consulting to assist us in that regard, to put together a compensation review and pay equity review. And following discussion with the consultant and an analysis of what the cost might be, council has considered that and approved that compensation review document on January the 8th. So with both of those sets of decisions comes the cost. And within the new version that you see tonight, staff have incorporated all of the organizational changes that were approved by council on January the 8th. And we've also incorporated the compensation review recommendations and approvals that council put together in that regard. So those are three changes that from the original document that we turned our mind to back in November. And the fourth thing that in particular Keith and I had reviewed over the course of the last week to 10 days is that we had an opportunity to review the operating budget, and in particular the year-to-date analysis. The original budget that was put together was based to a large extent on year-to-date numbers of July 31st of 2023. So certainly Keith and I had the benefit of knowing what the numbers were for the end of the year. And as such, we went about looking at the operating budget and made some miscellaneous changes. Nothing too substantive, as an example. So I'll give you a silly example that we turned our mind to. And I'm going to pick on the fire chief here. We happened to look at his revenue stream from 401 accidents and recoveries that we made through MTO, as an example. And we did a 5-year analysis in that regard, and we noticed that we are a little bit light with respect to our projection for revenues in 2024. I think we had originally budgeted $35,000. And as a result of looking at the trend analysis and the year to date for last year, we adjusted that to $50,000. So we did put together, turned our mind to a number of different miscellaneous changes to the budget. So that's what you're seeing today. You're seeing a culmination of those four changes to the overall operating budget. Where do we stand today? We've got a tax levy increase of about a little north of 7%, 7.08%. And a 1% increase is about $115,000, just a little shy of $115,000. So as you're contemplating whatever amendments that you'd like to turn your mind to, just keep that in mind. Okay, so what are some of the knowns or unknowns? We've gone about a tedious analysis over the course of the last 10 days or so to get where we are. And certainly there's some information that comes in from day to day that will change the numbers. As an example, Quinte access numbers have come in today as number one. Number two, the Lower Trent Conservation Authority numbers have changed as of today. We have a new number for QEDC, pretty close to what we had originally budgeted, within a couple $100. So it didn't bother me too much. You know, the county has gone about approving their budget. It will have an impact on our overall budget. We have not, Keith and I have not had an opportunity to turn our mind to that analysis yet. That's a job for tomorrow, quite frankly, or the next day maybe. And secondly, we've not had an opportunity to take a look at the educational rates. And obviously they will have an impact on the overall budget too. But that's the that's the next round of discussions that we're going to have. On page 5, if we can just go to that, Madam Clerk, can you maybe throw up page 5 on the on screen, please? Everybody's got a hard copy, yes? Okay, so what we need to understand is what are the drivers of the 7% increase? And what we tried to do at a high level is to identify some of the drivers of the overall budget increase. And you can see that we've identified those. We've talked earlier about the organizational review, what the impact is going to be. We're looking at buying some land, and there's a cost associated with financing that land. And that's fairly significant. We've talked about insurance. We've talked about external budgets. So I wanted to give both you as a council and community a sense of what the drivers are with respect to the 2024 operating budget. We've done that on page 5. The following page is, well, we're going to have a fulsome discussion tonight. I'm hopeful, I'm doubtful that we will finalize the budget tonight. So in so saying that, we're going to have to schedule some additional meetings. So the end of tonight's get together, we should turn our mind to when do we want to get together next time. I'm not going to talk about reserves or capital budget or long-term and short-term financing, because I think that was covered well during the capital budget that we had in place. There have not been any changes in that regard, so nothing's going to turn on whether we approve the operating budget with those numbers in place or not. So not going to spend any time talking about those items. You can see on page 13 and 14, I've listed the grant and aids, and you can see what each one of the individual groups requested and received. So that's all been itemized for your consideration. The next few pages really provide you with the budget summary, high-level budget summary that shows where the increases are, and they've been supplemented for your discussion tonight with individual departmental discussions. So that's where the questioning should be at the end of the day. Okay, so I'm going to stop there. And if you'd like to ask any questions to this point, happy to field those. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to some of the department heads and they can speak to their individual budgets, and you guys can ask whatever questions that you like.
Go ahead.
Thank you, and through you to the CAO. CAO Castleman, in the pay equity piece, referring to the meeting of January 8th. So I was not present at that meeting. There There were discussions about staff, like non-unionized staff, correct? And
Yes.
that has been incorporated into these numbers. There was also, I believe, a component about council salaries.
Yes.
Should that discussion not occur in open session?
The quick answer is yes.
Okay.
And part of our discussion tonight certainly is in an open forum. And council on the 8th were aware that the changes that I had proposed for council's consideration would have to be brought forward in an open session for approval by council.
Okay.
And my intent, subject to my department head meeting tomorrow, is to put that those items on the agenda for February the 5th.
Perfect.
That's my intention.
Thank you.
Anything further on the overview? Acting Deputy Mayor?
Thank you. Mr. Castleman, you made mention that the Quinte Transit and Lower Trent Conservation brought in new numbers today. Are they different than what we have in on our paperwork here?
The quick answer is yes. I've had an opportunity to certainly speak with Mrs. Bateman over the course of this morning and confirm the budgetary increases that came our way. And while there was a secondary look at the board level with respect to what I'll call category 1 or mandatory services, the original budget, I'm going to go off the top of my head here. I'll look at the numbers, but off the top of my head, the original request was 223,000 and some change. And as a result of some feedback, pushback by the board, those mandatory services and the allocation to Brighton went down to about 213 or so. So originally we saw a 19% increase and that got reduced to 13. But if you recall, this year we split, or the Conservation Authority split their services between category 1, which is mandatory, and category 2 and category 3 services. And if you recall, last fall, we turned our mind to category 2 and 3 services, and we entered into MOUs in that regard. Well, they certainly they come at a cost. We agreed to the MOU in that regard. So the quantum for both category 1, 2, and 3 is about a little north of $238,000. So the differential between last year's total and this year's total is gone up pretty sharply. It's gone from about, and I can look it up, but it's off the top of my head about 187 or so to a quantum of 238. So percentage wise, it's a relatively large number, but from a quantum standpoint, not significant. So that's an example of what's happened to the Conservation Authority.
Can you run down the Quinte Transit and the QEDC numbers as well?
Sure. The QEDC numbers, and I'm referring to page 14 in your document. So if you take a look at QEDC, you can see that we had we've shown the budget for 2023, which is 51,162, and we've estimated what their request was going to be for 2024, and we estimated it was going to be 52,912, and the latest number that we have is 52,733. So a row of pins at the end of the day, really no couple $100, $175 here or there. So didn't concern me at all. Quinte Transit, you can see we a couple lines up, same page 14. Under Quinte Transit, we had budgeted last year 47,823. We had estimated the number to be 49,300. The number that I saw today was 61,536. So it's up again, sharply, but not quantum wise. Those are the two changes that you spoke about.
Thank you. Anything further from council? Mr. Castleman, do you want to turn it over to your staff, please?
Sure. So I'm going to keep going here, and I'm going to start with let's talk to the fire chief for a few minutes. Starting on page 24.
Now, everybody, we're going to hit the highlights, okay? We're not reading a document that has already been read. So Chief, floor is yours.
Thank you, Your Worship, Deputy Mayor and Councilors. We've got a copy of the operating budget in front of you there. I just want to acknowledge a few highlights from 2023, if I could. So some of the accomplishments with your support in 2023 for Brighton Fire and Rescue, and the biggest asset we have is our staff. And these 45 dedicated firefighters, they have full-time jobs outside of here, and now with the mandatory certification have full-time jobs for being part of our fire department as well. We operate as one department with 2 stations with 45 full-time or part-time firefighters, and myself and the deputy chief and our 1 admin assistant. We responded to 423 calls last year. 36% of them were medical, 33% were fire related, fire alarms, CO detectors as well. 17% were motor vehicle accidents, then 14% were just assistance for other flooding and so on. We had 156 training events with over 4,000 hours of effort hours of training in the BFR last year. We attended 49 public education events and preventions as far as fun fairs, farmers markets, and Apple Fest and so on. We're now on about 70% compliance with the new Ontario regulation for 342-20 for mandatory training certification, and with a goal to be at 100% by January 2026, which will put us in compliance. We completed our 10-year fire master plan, our community risk assessment, and we supported a lot of fundraising for local community as far as Bowl for Kids, November, breast cancer awareness, PTSD awareness, and so on. We've also brought on 2 co-op students this year from the high school, which has been a help for us, as well as the kids from the high school. We're just come off a conference for retention and recruitment. Brighton Fire and Rescue is doing very well at that. We have more applications than we do positions right now, so we're very fortunate in the province and in the country. And so this current budget reflects Brighton Fire and Rescue moving forward with the growth, predicted growth, and the ever-changing demands placed on the fire departments, i.e. electric vehicles, lithium battery fires. So we've added prevention inspection demands. Our new short-term accommodation bylaw will also take up a lot of our time. And then the new farming industry and safety there will also has come into effect. We continue to search for funding and grants and corporate partners to help offset our costs. And there's we get a few possible savings that we can go over. One is the new radio system that was completed or will be completed by March has been taken over by Northumberland County, which will relieve $5,000 out of our budget from maintenance and tower rental. So the other part is for training, we've tried to keep costs down as much. It's around $5,000 per firefighter to train them from 0 to firefighter level 2. And we've partnered with within the county. Our fire services work very well together, and to try to keep that cost down and do it within our own county instead of shipping it out to other regional training centers across the province. Other than that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the fire chief? Chief, given the number of medical calls we go to, would it be wise of us to have that conversation with the chief of paramedics at the county and talk about upstaffing? Once, of course, they have space to do so. Or do you think that would help?
Oh, definitely worship, definitely more ambulances would help for sure. We work very well with our paramedics, and our tiered response agreement right now is working well for us. I know I'll speak on a turn here, but when I was my last department I was at, we were 65% medical calls. So actually municipality Brighton, we're doing fairly well. We're comparable to every other municipality that has an ambulance base in it. So
Well, then we'll just carry on.
yeah, I think we're doing very well there. With that said, we've had three last year Survivor Night Awards where we did actually do CPR and had defib on some local residents that actually walked out of the hospital. So that's pretty rewarding, and it does work.
Brilliant. Thank you. Anything further for the chief? Mr. Castleman?
I'm going to call upon Mr. Walsh to talk about planning, bylaw, and building department. And in so doing, he's got a couple other committees that are within his area, certainly the accessibility committee, the sustainability committee, and so we'll have a chat about that. So all of his areas are on page 31, 32, 33.
Thank you. Director Walsh?
Through the mayor to council. So on page 31 of the budget report, you'll find the planning development operating budget. Just a brief reminder, the department has three main functions. That is the planning function, which deals with approvals of subdivisions and zoning and those sorts of things. Then it also has the building permit issuance. So we have a chief building official and a deputy, and there's also the third component of the bylaw enforcement. So I think council's all aware of that, but just not a problem in reviewing these things. So the first component of that is on page 31, dealing with particularly the planning portion of the budget. So we see that some of the revenues are lower than what we had expected. Some of the application volumes can be volatile from year to year. And so we saw some changes of that in this operating budget for 2024. It reflects a bit of a slower activity, as most municipalities are seeing. Some of the developers were interviewed to see what kind of building activities that they were expecting to see. So both the planning and the building components of the budget reflect some of those discussions. The accessibility committee is not really, it's historically been part of this budget, although there's no reporting function of planning staff to the accessibility committee. That's been handled by the clerks. The heritage committee does have some support from our manager of approvals in particular, who has a history of dealing with heritage matters in other municipalities where he's worked. So we don't see much change there. We have the Sustainability Advisory Committee. I think we now really call it this year the Environmental Advisory Committee. And it had a component, I think, previously for Sustainability Advisory Committee or coordinator. I think that's been addressed with council through the CIO. But the committee is active and has a small contribution to the budget there. We see the land banking program, the initiative there, that has been also supported through the capital budget for doing a business case study and some servicing design work, assuming we do actually acquire some lands to support that program. So that's a rather exciting initiative, and there's been money transferred into that reserve. And we have some other components there, Conservation Authority, the CO's commented on that, and some industrial park matters. Those are really a matter of the economic development domain. A lot of the revenues have been forecasted reflective also of the updated fees and charges bylaw. So the fees and charges bylaw, as council may recall, has been put some emphasis on pre-consultation application. Staff spent a lot of time on that, so it's only appropriate there'd be some cost recovery on the time that staff spent on that. And needs to be more emphasis on that as well, just to maintain the quality of submissions and the quality ultimately of decisions that are made. We see next on page 32, the billing services operating budget. Council may recall that under the billing code the billing permits are a cost recovery program, so that the costs have incurred of supporting that program are recovered by the revenues, and nothing much more, not much less. And so again, it's one of those things, excuse me, that it can be a little bit volatile. Different billing activity varies significantly from year to year, oftentimes. Last year we had 2 large billing permits, and that put our revenues up more than expected, or put us basically in line to what was expected, but trending for that year, had been lower. So the revenues have been suggested to be a little bit lower coming for 2024, but again, that's a little bit unpredictable. Also, what may be fitting into that is the lack of inventory of subdivision lots. So, but now that we've got close to registration, I still need to touch base with the lawyer as to what the status there is. There's been some delay in actually getting registered phase 3 of Applewood and the registration of phase 1 for Brighton Meadows. And that will be a total of over 100 lots. So I think there's partly a matter of getting inventory into the municipality that will sustain the billing permit activity. Because the building permit activity is supported by a number of staff, including staff from infrastructure, et cetera, there is a cost allocation. So typically we get a building permit application in, the application is circulated to infrastructure, roads, et cetera, planners for zoning compliance, sign off, et cetera. And finance has a bit of a cost distribution of that revenue. So some of that revenue does find its way in as transfers to other departments. On page 33 is the bylaw enforcement operating budget. That budget basically reflects the employment of our current bylaw enforcement officer, but also the addition of 1 full-time equivalent. That's been on council's radar for a while now, but now with the added challenges of the prospect of more activity in enforcement of the short-term accommodations program, particularly licensing requirements or failure to achieve licensing requirements, as the case may be. And secondly, the automated speed enforcement program that council is looking at. It's expected that that's going to be creating a little bit of a rather hectic, if not that at least busy bylaw enforcement demand. So the operating budget is recommending an additional full-time equivalent. There may be also some changes in policy for bylaw enforcement coming forward that would also result in more activity, and stay tuned for more on that. But we've had some discussions about that in the past. So I think that's about it in summary for if council has any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to work this one backwards and start at bylaw enforcement, and then we'll go backwards through the list. So are there any questions on bylaw enforcement budget? Councillor Freitas.
Through the chair to CAO and Director Walsh. This is operating, so it's really just salaries and administrative expense. Did we put some number into capital for the actual camera equipment?
CAO?
I'm hesitating because I've been so focused on operating budget, I've not turned my mind to capital. I'll tell you what we have done. We've give further consideration to the report that was presented to council back in November the 20th, when we introduced the whole ASC program and made some projections with respect to both operating and salaries and licensing and potential revenues. So what we've done is we've added the staff in order to administer the program. And we've added an estimate with respect to what the revenues might be. So that estimate is about $100,000, which may sound a little bit light, given the original discussions that we have had. Having said that, I think we need to recognize that we need to approve the budget firstly. The budget is likely not going to get approved until the end of February. That would be my guesstimate. Council puts its stamp on the budget, which gives us authority to go out and hire a staff member and get the program in place. As we are all aware, even if we initiated a new program, you have to give 90 days notice with respect to what changes that we're introducing. And so there's no surprises to join Q Public. So at best, you're not going to get revenue flow, I'm guessing, till June or July of this year at best. And so that's why I've tempered the estimate with respect to revenues. We'll be a lot smarter after 1 year once we get this program up and going. But for now, we've put together a $100,000 in revenue. As far as capital is concerned, I'll have to take a look at the capital budget. I've not really looked at it in a little bit, but I'll turn my mind to that and get a response back to council accordingly.
I just took a quick flip through the capital budget spreadsheets, and the only thing under bylaw enforcement is the citywide software component. So I don't see anything in there for capital purchases for ASC. So that must be included somewhere operationally. So I think we, if I'm presupposing the next question, we would probably like to know where it is. Yeah, for next meeting. Anything further? Go ahead.
Through the chair, to the CAO and Director Walsh, and perhaps this is not the wrong place, or this is the wrong place to be talking about this, but I thought I'd throw it out there. At Roma, I had the opportunity to talk to the folks from Traffic Logics, who are very keen to work with us with the implementation. And they're excited over the fact that we could become one of Eastern Ontario's processing centers. And the conversation progressed to the opportunity for us to be the processing center for all of the lower tiers within the county. And I'm just going to suggest that maybe we want to think about that opportunity in putting this together, because it's a supplemental income stream. And I think it would be wonderful if some of the other, we're able to help some of the other municipalities and get a little compensation for the service we provide.
Comments or questions? You're good? Good. Anything further from members of council on bylaw budget? Building services budget. Anyone? Planning and development. Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. The Accessibility Committee is seeing a significant increase in their budget. I know part of the summary here is to go to improvements in the businesses, I'm assuming in downtown. Could I have an explanation what that might be for?
Madam Clerk, Madam Deputy Clerk.
The Accessibility Committee had made a recommendation to council as a goal to help not just downtown, but all, I believe it was local business and service clubs in Brighton to become more accessible. The idea was to be kind of like a cost sharing program. So they had recommended that $50,000 be added to the budget and that a program be developed if council agreed to the increase by staff developing the program afterwards. They didn't have any kind of specific idea of how it should work, but some sort of a, whether it's, you cover $5,000 of your project and we'll cover 5 or whatever kind of program got created by staff. So that they weren't burdened with the full cost of implementing a ramp into their store or whatever. It was to assist and promote the need and help for accessibility. I'm sure Councillor Wheeldon or Councillor Ferretis remembers the meeting where they recommended this, and if they want to pipe up and speak up as well.
Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. Yeah, the idea is that AODA is the legislation for accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act. It's supposed to be implemented by a certain date. We're way behind. There was just a report issued that said that we need to declare a state of emergency in Ontario regarding accessibility, which is to say that the province's leadership on this has not come through at all. We're not going to implement AODA even close to the deadline that was agreed to. And so basically at this point, if we want to make sure that Brighton is accessible the way that we have in theory been trying to do, we cannot rely on others to do it for us. And we can't necessarily rely on businesses to bear the entire cost of that without some encouragement, we'll say.
Councillor Ferretis.
I concur with the deputy clerk's explanation and Councillor Wheeldon. The other thing is there was a recognition that some of the retail space landlords from out of the city and the businesses there have difficulty getting their landlords to make these sort of improvements. So if we had this program, we might be able to convince some of them to step up and make the accessibility improvements that were required for the core and wherever else.
Thank you. Acting Deputy Mayor.
So these discussions have been going on for years here. They've also been a concern of the DBIA. They have certainly tried over the last several years to make some of the downtown businesses certainly more accessible. There are several shops downtown that have the mobile ramps. To do anything that could be permanently accessible on our sidewalks downtown just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Our sidewalks are not created for that kind of thing. Our sidewalks are too small. If you go by exactly what the specifics would be for, if you're speaking ramps only, I don't know how that would work. I could see certainly spending some money on some of the sidewalk issues of themselves, but I would think that that would fall also under the Public Works responsibility. So I just have some concerns about what exactly you would do with the 50,000, specifically if you're speaking with the downtown core.
So let's park that discussion and carry on, but we can certainly, I'd rather hear from everybody first and then start talking about what we may want to look at more carefully. Fair enough. CAO.
I was going to make some comments with respect to accessibility.
Go ahead.
And get council thinking a little bit. Laudable program suggestion. I'm wondering whether the committee has turned their mind to what is our facility gap that we have in our community for the 16, 17, 25 facilities that we have. There is a gap, and we're doing our best to try and get from where we are today to the milestone of 2025. And we're making strategic decisions in that regard. So a little bit concerning that we're diverting money away from meeting our own obligations and trying to take on the rest of the municipality and what their obligations might be. And at the end of the day, $50,000 is a row of pins. And it's not going to accomplish a lot at the end of the day. Some idle comments. Next on the list is our economic development officer.
Oh, I don't think we're done.
Oh, sorry.
Nice try. It was a good effort. Acting Deputy Mayor.
These Sustainability Advisory Committee with another 73,000. I know, once again, some of the dollars have been put in reserve, unspent money from last year. I know there's been discussion regarding the organizational review. Is that money just going to be kind of placed there? Are we going to be able to use it for something? It's a significant amount.
I'll jump in here, and Jeff and I can do it a bit of a tag team here. The reality is that we had a fulsome discussion on January the 8th with respect to this particular matter, and we resolved that we were not going to hire staff in order to deal with this matter, but we were going to retain the services of a consultant to assist us in putting together a climate action plan. And so Councillor Wilden and myself have sort of tried to search in Northumberland where they've done a plan and how much it was to try and understand what the quantum is. And we found most recently that Port Hope has budgeted in around $90,000 or so. So we had a discussion this morning talking about different options. So I can throw a couple different ideas, and then I can back away and you guys can have a discussion. So I think we've established what the cost might be with respect to completing a sustainability plan. So it's $90,000. We've brought forward from the 2023 budget $65,000. So all we need is the residual, which is $25,000. So you could leave $25,000 in the operating budget, or you could take $25,000 out of contingency because it's a one-time expenditure, and then reduce the operating budget by $65,000 if you're looking for some savings. You know, we're at 7 points or 7.1. And if you're looking to make some amendments that are fairly significant, that's one. That's a $65,000 change. So we had that discussion. We're trying to accomplish and get the study done, and we're trying to pay for it as wisely as we can. So those are a couple different options. Either leave the $25,000 in the operating budget and or take it out of contingency reserve. My recommendation would be to take it out of contingency reserve and realize the $65,000 in savings in the operating budget. But that's open for discussion.
Do you have anything to add, Councillor Wilden?
Thank you. This time last year, when we first put down that $65,000, it was with the understanding that while we didn't yet know exactly what we would do toward a climate action plan, we wanted to have the capacity to do something at some point. And so we've succeeded there. We have money there. I had been pushing for hiring a sustainability officer, looking at the IT master plan and fire and safety master plan, both of which their first recommendation was hire staff to do this. And so I thought, well, if we get a consultant to write us a plan, they're probably going to suggest that we hire staff. If we hire staff, maybe the first thing they could do is write the plan. And so I thought, if we come, no matter which way we come at it, as long as there's money there, we can make the call. Now, CAO has pointed to expertise on our existing staff that he feels could implement a climate action plan. And so I'm fine with that as long as we get the climate action plan. Port Hope has just budgeted $90,000. I have no other comparators for that number. But I know that they have secured a firm to do their climate action plan. So that's a very recent number. I hope that we can put a little bit of a buffer around that so that we're not coming up short if it comes down to it. But any step forward in this regard is a good step.
Thank you. Councillor Botwell.
And thank you, Mr. Chair. So we will come back to discuss this further. Is that my understanding?
Yes,
We will. Okay, thank you.
that's my intent anyway. Anything else on planning and development? I'd just like to look at land banking for a second. We have $125, almost $126,000 in there. I assume that's repayment.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly right. As we all know, we've been contemplating some acquisition of some properties, and we've been in direct negotiations over the course of the last couple, 3 months or so. And we thought that we would have a deal completed by the end of 2023. That hasn't happened. Well, while we thought that that was going to happen, we put together a financing strategy, external debt, both principal and interest, in order to cover those costs for 2024 in its entirety. So my thought process is the numbers about $125,000 or so and change. And that's comprised of about $100,000, $105,000 in principal and the residual left in interest. So we don't know where we are, but I'm thinking that if we go ahead and make the acquisition, those numbers will likely change. And the reality is that it's the end of January today. And even if we did a deal tomorrow, which we're not going to, but let's say we did a deal in February sometime, probably wouldn't close for a month or a couple of months. And so we'd be looking at a new payment schedule, a new P&I schedule, maybe from maybe from April or May. So just part of the year versus the whole year. So those numbers could change. Obviously, we don't know what the acquisition amount is going to be. You know, that's a bit in flux right now. We put together some numbers based upon a certain threshold. I understand that that threshold has changed somewhat through Mr. Walsh, and what the end number is going to be, I don't know. But I'm saying that that's an opportunity for us to have some savings in our operating budget just by looking at the amortization schedule and what the P&I might be.
Do we have an approximate number if we weren't to close until March 28th or whatever? Do we have an approximate number of what that looks like for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I think that in our scurrying on Friday, that was set aside. But that's something that we is on our radar that we can turn our mind to the next day or so and send an email off to council with a couple different options, sort of saying, okay, if we buy it for this amount and we close on April 30th, this is the new P&I. Give you a couple different options to think about. So we'll do that in the next couple days.
Councillor Botwell.
Thank you, and through you to the CAO. I suppose we'd also be looking at perhaps a difference in interest rate by closing date as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Mr. Castleman.
Okay, going to move on and ask Mr. Hageman to speak to his budget.
All right, through the mayor. Not going to belabor this too long. Just a couple major pressure, not major pressure points, small pressure points. Obviously, we're looking at an increase in our events category. We've got an incredible team of volunteers that's put a lot of time and effort into concerts in the park, Canada Day, Santa Claus Parade, movies in the park. And fact of the matter is COVID's been behind us for a few years now, and prices are going up for bands, for Canada Day activities, and we finally need to ask for a little bit more there. It's the reason for that increase. As we all know, it's the Apple Fest committee. This is the 50th anniversary event, asking for a jump there. But as we all know, 50th anniversary is something to be celebrated. Committee's looking at doing some more celebrations in the likes of fireworks, drone show, added entertainment. It's going to come at a cost. And finally, last one I'll speak to is a full-time position within our department. My biggest success, as I always say, is the person sitting to my left right now, and I hope I can only repeat finding someone to be part of this team and keep building this department, because we're doing some cool stuff and we want to be able to do more cool stuff. So that's my brief, but hopefully fulsome remarks.
Well, it's all about the cool stuff here in Brighton, isn't it? Thank you, Mr. Hagerman. Questions or comments? Go ahead, Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Talking about cool stuff. There's been a little bit of a discussion, and certainly I've had discussion last week with Mr. Hagerman and Ms. Birch regarding community events. And cool stuff being the value of the volunteers that are the cornerstone of this community, not only on the committees that we have in the municipality, but we have lots of service clubs. We have a lot of other committees, and we have a small subcommittee in the Community Events Committee who would like to recognize that it is high time that the municipality recognizes the goodwill, the commitment, the free time that so many do. So we are hoping to work around the volunteer week in April to create a small, not glamorous or no gala event, but to recognize and highlight all of the work that our volunteers do. So there is a request for an extra $5,000 to be added to the Community Events Committee budget.
That's captured in these numbers? It's not, so it's additional too?
It's additional good stuff money.
I believe it's cool stuff. Yeah, thank you. You don't. All right, going the wrong way, but all right. Anything else on economic development for now? Go ahead, Councilor Wright.
I'm just wondering what the 20,000 for Brownfield is for.
Mr. Hagerman?
Through the mayor, we're trying to build up our brownfield reserves to have some funding in there to eventually have our CIP program up and running. So we're transferring $20,000 year over year at this point.
This would be to incent people to redevelop on brownfields, is that correct? Thank you. Anything else on economic development? Given the fact that Mr. Hagerman's team was non-existent a few years ago, you're doing a remarkable job, both of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Castleman.
Okay, next, I'm going to keep chatting, and I'm going to move to the general government operating budget, which is outlined on page 22 and 23. And I've talked about the majority of these items. This really involves the council area, involves my area, HR area, the clerk's area, and the various expenses and revenues associated with those. tried to highlight a few items for your consideration. Certainly, we're always in the market for obtaining more grants all the time. And certainly one of the grants that has increased fairly sharply is the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. It's gone up about $106,000 or so. So that's great news for us, and that supplements our budget. That's almost one tax point in itself, just with that one grant going up. Supplementary taxes have remained pretty static, and I think it's around $224,000 or so. So nothing has changed too much there. We've spoken a little bit about what did we do on January the 8th? Well, we dealt with the organizational review changes, and we've dealt with the compensation review changes, and we've incorporated all of those into the overall budget. So beyond that, nothing really has changed terribly. I invite anybody else who is in this area, whether it's HR or whether it's clerks, if you guys have any comments, feel free to jump in.
Anyone want to jump? Questions or comments? Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. 2 years ago, Council of the Day supported the Period Promise Initiative. And in the community center, we have installed dispensers and receptacles for feminine hygiene products. Speaking with the CEO of the library, we've discussed this on a couple of occasions over the last few months. And I have also spoken last week with the manager of Parks and Rec regarding the cost to how much it costs to I'll look after this in the community center. And I'm wondering if this is something that council could get their head around, is to maybe spend another approximately $1,500, once again, going in the wrong direction, but to kind of support this program here in the municipal building, in the lobby here, as well as in the Codrington Community Center as well. I know Heather from the library is certainly on board as far as helping to promote and look after this, but looking for the funds in order to keep this going. The initial cost would be for, as I say, dispensers and receptacles, and a small amount for product for this year. After that, it would just be purchase for product, which would be about $500 a year.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Mayor. I think if we made the promise, we should keep the promise and make sure we're doing that across our facilities in the municipality, wherever it may be needed. So, Mr. Castleman, any idea where we might find $3,000 or so?
1,500, I think, would cover
Total?
both here and Codrington.
So probably out of contingency or some other fund. I
Right.
don't think there's any need to add it, but we'll get it into the budget and you can report back to council.
Right.
Thank you.
Just want to add to that. Vicky and I spoke as well. Vicky has suggested that we don't put it in Memorial Park in the bathrooms, considering the vandalism, the problems that we have there, that we would just do here and as well in Codrington.
I think we should probably, no, never mind. Yes, the less we can put into those bathrooms, the better from a vandalism perspective. I would agree. Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, thank you to the CAO. I note here it says that the IT department has been separated from the finance department, and that the organizational review contemplates additional tech support. But when I look at the number here for the IT department, it goes from 183 to 159, and leads me to wonder, is that the right number? We seem to be going in the wrong direction. I would have expected an increase there because I would have anticipated not only the cost of the additional person, but probably some additional software to help integrate our systems, reinforce our cloud storage. and that sort of stuff. But it seems to be going the wrong way if we're looking to build the IT component. Can you comment or enlighten me, or am I leading this down the increased path as well?
Mr. Councilman?
Okay, I'm gonna try and jump in here and maybe invite our manager or Mr. Puffer to speak to this. Certainly, we had some significant discussions over the course of the last week or so. I know that IT provides support to a number of departments, including water and sewer. And so water and sewer is not part of the tax component. So some of those additional costs have been transferred to the water and sewer budget and not to the tax side. So while you might see $150,000 on the tax side, you might also see $150,000 on the water and sewer side. So the quantum for the budget is going up. It's just in two different locations. The other comment was that while we did some organizational changes and added a tech support position, it wasn't for the full year. It was just for part of the year. I think my recollection, it was for 8 months or 7 months or something in that nature. So you don't see the full blown impact for the year, just part of the year.
Anything further? Go ahead.
Through the chair to the CAO, just looking at the expenditure line for the clerk's office, and it is showing pretty good increase, but is there, and maybe it's part of capital, but is there adequate funding in there for us to finally fix up the basement so that we have adequate record storage and that sort of stuff?
There will never be enough money to finish up that basement.
So and I'll invite either Danny or Candace to jump in here, but my recollection is that that's a capital item that we need to turn our mind to. And I know that we had some discussion during the capital budget. I don't recall exactly what that discussion was. I know that certainly off the top of my head, I know one of the critical issues that we had was with respect to sealing the water damage or leaks that were in the basement. And my recollection was that we allocated about $50,000 or so to deal with that particular issue. I also know that Danny is working with IO, Infrastructure Ontario, to decommission the court cells downstairs, and that's taking a little bit longer than what we had anticipated. And we're hoping to wrap that up in the next few months. So from my perspective, it's a capital item. And do we have some long-term plans for down there? Sure we do. But we're not ready yet. We've got to do the ABCs. We've got to decommission the IO material out of there firstly, and we have to make sure that the space is waterproof secondly. And then we can turn our mind from a capital perspective on what we want to have ultimately down there.
Anything else? Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just off Councillor Ferretta's records management. I know we've been tossing this around for a few years as far as how do we look after that? Do we get a staff person for that? Are we anywhere near kind of assessing that part of the program?
Madam Clerk.
Yeah, well, legislatively, we're really not in compliance with our records management system. We're working with Sharehold so that we can use it through Office 365 and trying to put that into place, but I'm not sure how far we're getting with that yet. It's going to the IT committee for review, and we'll see what goes. It was in the IT management plan. So we'll see. We're trying to figure it out. But for all of our records, that would be for electronic records. So our physical records, a lot of it is being stored at the county level. Otherwise, we are jammed full in our vaults.
Anything further? CAO.
Okay, I'm going to keep chatting before I hand it off here. I'm going to move to page 26 and talk to you a little bit about cemeteries and health services operating budget. And so let's talk a little bit about the health services and what's happening in that regard. As we all know, we have 170 Main Street, the Brighton Health Services Center, and we have a number of different leases within that facility, whether it's the YMCA or whether it's the local FO or the individual doctors that we're dealing with down there. So there's a revenue stream associated with the monies coming in. And if you recall, we bought the building, I think back in 17 or so, and made a payment plan in order to pay off the debt associated with that. So we're continuing to do that on an annualized basis. So you're going to see those dollars within the individual budgets. You're also going to see the fact that we've entered into medical services funding agreements with a variety of different doctors. As you can recall, we have about 4 or 5 doctors right now that we've entered into agreements in the last couple of years, and the quantum for the flow of money to those doctors is about $95,000 this year, and that is being paid for out of reserves. So that's just an in and out $95,000. Within this overall budget, you can see that we've entered into an agreement with Docs by the Bay, and we had renegotiated that, I think it was last year or so, come up with a new formula. And the quantum that we're looking at is just a little north of $38,000 or so. Beyond that, we've already turned our mind to some of the other cemeteries that we have within the community, and we dealt with those other 5 or 6 or 7 miscellaneous cemeteries during our discussion on November the 27th, and we made an allocation of, I think it was $26,150 towards a variety of those different cemeteries. So that's not new news to council members. We've also, during the grant and aid allocations, made some donations towards some hospitals and hospital foundations to the quantum of about $37,500 or so. So again, it's just a showing of decisions that council has made, certainly back in the fall. Beyond that, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions on health services, the medical building, or the health services center? Councillor Paredes.
Through the chair to the CAO, in the event of the recovery of funding from the departed physician, does that become an offset to these and the funds go back to the reserve?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, any recoverable goes absolutely back into the reserve.
Anything further on those items? Go ahead, Councillor Wheeldon.
I just wanted to make a public note that we're talking about a significant amount of money that municipalities are paying for healthcare services, which are ostensibly supposed to be the purview of the province. There was a report released at Roma that says that rural property taxes contribute $481 million annually to healthcare in Ontario. So just want that on the record.
We don't do it because we want to. We do it because the people of Brighton need it at the end of the day. Anything else on health services? Anything on cemeteries? CAO.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. Whiteman, and he can speak to us a little bit about public works, water, sewer.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just briefly, try and make it short and sweet, just looking at comparative analysis of our 2023 budget and our 2024 budget. Firstly, we oversee maintenance operations of existing municipal infrastructure buildings and fleet. And we also provide project management services to quite a few other departments. From that comparative analysis of looking at 23 and 24, we have filled quite a few positions and still trying to fill up some more positions as well in public works. So there is an increase overall in our public works administration. There's also some increase in our buildings expenditure, as well as our roadways maintenance. Those are the three items that come to mind. There have been other items also in terms of expenditure, but they're using a term of Mr. Castleman, it's the quantum. That's not so much. It's the traffic light expenditure as well. So I think those are where most of our increases have come. Administration, buildings expenditure, as well as our roadways maintenance expenditure. Those are the three main items there that have contributed to that increase, mostly. We are making some organizational changes in terms of titles in our capital infrastructure, just in terms of making it much more feasible in terms of the work that we do in capital infrastructure, changing those positions to project tech positions in many instances there. It says here, and I think it would help us to reduce some costs and project delays, and as we incorporate this into our budget. So those, I think, are the major highlights of page 27 and 28 in terms of overall, if we do a comparative analysis from 23 and 24.
Thank you, Director Whiteman. Questions or comments from members of council? Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Sidewalk expenditures, I see we're kind of decreasing the amount that we've spent over the last several years quite significantly. Could you explain the why on those, please, Mr. Whiteman? Thank you.
I think my predecessor did an excellent job at getting a lot of the sidewalks done, which we have done, and he's did a very good job. So we don't have as many issues with sidewalks as we had in the past. That was well addressed. So it's less of a concern. That's the best way to explain it.
And Director, I assume that this budget line item would not include sidewalks that are being dealt with during reconstruction. Those would be capital projects. Is that right?
That's correct.
Thank you. Okay. Acting Deputy Mayor as a follow-up.
Yeah, that would be, I've got two more questions, but that would be one of them as far as, so the reconstruction of Prince Edward Street, there'll be significant sidewalk work done there. Is that part of that reconstruction project?
Yes, it is. It's roughly around 350,000, remember correctly, from capital. Yeah.
One more question.
Go ahead.
Last year, I know, and I think it was a complaint-driven project as far as dealing with the invasive wild parsnip. There seems to be a lot of it in the rural area of the municipality. Do we have any plan as to how we are going to kind of eliminate that, or are we going to do something about that, or are we just going to work at that based on a complaint kind of system?
To answer, I think at the moment, we have been addressing it on a complaint basis as we stand right now. I think we have to do more of an investigation analysis in terms of how invasive that species is, and address it as such if it is such a concern. It has not come to my knowledge as being a problem, but I stand to be correct, and we will address it then accordingly based upon how bad it actually is.
Councilor Wright.
I think my question my brain went elsewhere since then. The roadways maintenance expenditures, does that mean that more roads are being taken care of, or is that just a cost increase in dealing with the roads that we are dealing with?
Director Whitman.
I'm going to hand over to Danny. I think there are some costs associated with just input costs, resource costs, but those are the concerns with just and some supply chain issues as well. But Danny, maybe you want to address.
Yeah, so there's definitely increases with roads annually. Asphalt pavement index, that changes yearly, anywhere from, 2023, I think, per ton, it was around $918 per ton. This year, 2024, it's around $1,200 a ton. Emulsions go up, gravel goes up, unfortunately. So it's just that increased cost. And reviewing some of the roads that with the roads need study, we're starting to notice a little bit more where, for example, like an asphalt road, instead of redoing an asphalt, we might want to do a micro seal. But before we do that, we have to do crack sealing. So it becomes that domino effect, if you will.
Thank you both. Anything else? CAO?
At this time, I'm going to pass it over to Parks and Recreation and have Vicky take the lead.
Ms. Hallam? You will in a second. We'll see. And my comment was, we'll see.
So the Parks and Recreation budget was, I just wanted to make note that it was prepared by my predecessor. So just making note. So each of the line items have been done very stable. So you can see that there's not a lot of wavering from the other previous year or previous years. So having said that, his vision may not capture the same as mine moving forward for both revenue and potential expenses to come this year. Thank you.
No, thank you. Questions or comments from Parks and Rec? Go ahead, Councillor Botwell.
Thank you through you to the manager of Parks and Rec. I hate to ask. I see there's a line item for other parks expenditures. Is there a breakdown? What might be captured in that? Even if it's something separate, it's a large amount. And so I'm wondering where that has been allocated. It's just under the canteen revenue expenditures. There's other parks revenue, which is 0, and then other parks expenditures, which is now 292,000.
Yeah.
Up just under 7%. I don't recall having a conversation about what that was last year.
Sorry, you'll have to bear with me. I can dig into that deeper for you at another time, if that's okay.
Sure, that's okay. I realized quickly that you probably didn't have an answer.
We're also fond of receiving emails if that's
Okay.
a preferable choice. Anything else from Parks and Rec? CAO?
The last item is really just dealing with the police budget. There's not really a lot to talk about. It hasn't changed very much, quite frankly. And so there's not a lot to say about that. So we've had an opportunity over the course of the last hour or so to review the individual budgets with the department heads, with the managers, and perhaps, Mr. Chair, you want to circle back and suggest any amendments by the gang that they deem appropriate.
Thank you, CAO. Just anecdotally, the mayor of Quinny West called me today and said, "How much is your police budget going up?" And I said, "Not a whole lot." "Jim, how much is yours going up?" And he said, "Not a whole lot." Both OPP policed and, are there gaps? There are. We know there are. But as my cohort next door said, everyone always complains about speeding. At least they're dealing with the real issues. And we certainly see calls for service going up. But even with the known vacancies that the OPP have on an ongoing basis, we're still fairly well policed for a couple $1 million at the end of the day. So take a look at Coburg Police Services budget, folks. And be happy for what we've got. And that's all I'm going to say about policing. So I think we can either, not the right word, we can either nickel and dime this and start looking at where to go, or we can have a conversation about where we're comfortable with a tax increase and then provide direction to staff to find a way to get there, which I think is probably the better way to go from a more global budgeting perspective. But Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. I'm not actually as comfortable with that approach because when we start talking about where we feel comfortable, we're asking our guts to make decisions about things that are actually concrete numbers. My thought on it is that we need to make sure that trusting that staff have given us numbers that are adequate to meet their needs in order to achieve the goals that we've set for them. That we don't want to undermine any of their efforts in any way. And so sometimes you can save a couple of bucks and lose the whole point. So I would like to approach it from a perspective of if there's anything that we feel could be cut, that we identify what that is based on staff's perspectives rather than how I feel about something.
Fair enough. And perhaps I should have started out, Mr. Castleman, with congratulations. Thank you to you and your staff for bringing us, although it seems like a big number, 7% increased budget in a 17% world, I think is rather remarkable. So thank you all for your efforts. I know that the good people of Brighton will see 7% as a huge amount of money, and it's not insignificant. But given the pressures on the municipality and given the fact that we live with a revenue stream that is inelastic at best, it does not rise and fall with the economy, and given the fact that we are, as municipalities, pushing back at the province on that, regardless, our team has come to us with what I think is a pretty tight budget, and will continue moving the community forward, continue providing the services we do for the residents of Brighton in a reasonable way. So thank you for that. But I'll go around the table and see what everybody else wants to do. Councillor Wright?
I have a tendency to agree with Councillor Wheeldon on this, having gone through the budget with Lower Trent Conservation. It was fairly eye-opening as to where the cuts landed and how it impacted services to all the communities that they take care of. It's hard to pick and choose lines to decrease because you know it's going to decrease service. And you read the Brighton residents page on the regular, and by God, they want their services. So
At a 0% tax increase.
well, yeah, exactly. So, I'm a bit more of a realist along those lines, and I see the costs going up everywhere as well. So it's not surprising, and I'm really very much impressed with a 7.08% tax increase, given what places like Toronto are dealing with at the moment.
Don't get me started with Toronto. Unless and until the good people of Toronto with their $1 million homes are paying the same amount of taxes that I'm paying, no. Councillor Paredes.
It's a new one. I have to figure out how to operate it. So the chair, My recollection is, the 7.8 is kind of the same numbers we had last year. And I didn't hear a whole lot of negative feedback over that number. I looked on the internet and I see that Northumberland County, Warden, has approved a 3-year budget, and this year's number is 6.57, which is kind of like the number they had last year. So assuming there's nothing significant in education, and I'm not getting a feeling from the CAO or Mr. Puffer that that's foreseeable, we're going to come in at about the same number as last year. And the ability to deliver a whole bunch of things. So I kind of like the job that the CAO and staff has done. I'm quite comfortable with it. The only thing I would ask is perhaps there's some stuff in the capital side I'm not quite comfortable with, that we have a little more discussion before we actually issue the RFP on some of those projects, because they might be able to be, those funds might be able to be put to better use or restored to reserves. But other than that, that's my read of the blending of the numbers. So I'm comfortable with the way it is. Well done, CAO.
Thank you. And rather than re-prosecuting the capital budget, which we've already provided to staff to move forward with, perhaps we can have that discussion offline, or you can have that discussion with the CAO about what your concerns are. And then should that require a report come to council for information, it can be done post-budget, because we can always add money to reserves that we've budgeted for it at a future. I just don't want to re-prosecute the capital budget at this point. And I forgot your name, Councillor Butwell, sorry.
You literally just used it. You just say Anne. That's okay. I actually, surprisingly, when seeing that number, it's shocking at first to me, because I come from Toronto, where if anything over 2% is, raising heck. But I tend to agree. I think that each and every one of the staff people, the managers, the directors, the CAO, everyone's done a really good job at selecting the projects that are most important, and seeking out background information that is relevant and to budgeting for those items. And we have good staff, and I trust them on this one. I am comfortable with leaving it at this. I'm not comfortable, as my colleagues have said, picking a number arbitrarily and trying to aim for it. We look after the citizens. We do a good job. And we do hear compliments, even though we do hear the negative. People are much more apt to complain than to compliment, but our staff does a really good job providing those services. So I don't think it's an unreasonable amount at all.
Thank you, Acting Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. So for the most part, I agree as well. A couple of numbers were discussed tonight. The $65,000 in the sustainability department, the increase to Lower Trent, as you said, which is a little bit higher than what we have in our book. The few $1,000s that I added to the budget. So, yeah. So I don't know exactly what that number is, but that to me might take us just below 7%.
The quick answer is it'll absolutely take us below 7%.
Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I'm cool with that.
Again, $115,000 is about 1 point.
Yeah. So, and we're not quite at that much, but we're almost a 0.5% is what I'm kind of figuring. We do have a couple of things. We haven't yet had our last discussion with the YMCA yet, I don't believe. So those are dollars that are still floating somewhere. And I'm not sure if all of the grants and aid requests have been fulfilled, if there's still discussion coming around some of those. I think at the end of the day, I'm good with the numbers. I don't have any, but I'd like to see the in and out of the few that we're missing.
So I'll make my comment, and then I think I have some questions around some very specific line items that you just mentioned, and where we want to go, where we want to provide direction to staff before we meet again. And I'm going back a long time. Previous councils, well, maybe not that long. Previous councils would would do the Brighton Ontario residence page thing. We need all the services. We need to provide all the things. We need to build all the stuff. We need to do all the things. We need to budget for that. Oh, but we only want a 2% tax increase. So staff would put all the things in the budget, and then we would get to, I don't know, about Thanksgiving and go, what's going on with all the things we wanted? And staff would say, well, we budgeted for all the things, but we didn't have the resources to get them done. And so we would find ourselves with these huge surpluses, and it looked great, right? It looked great on the balance sheet, but we weren't getting the things done. We were budgeting for them, but we weren't getting them done because we didn't put the people in place to do the jobs, or we didn't provide the resources to get those things done. We've done a great job at that. This council especially, a bit better last council than previous councils, but still there were those voices at that table even that would say, we want all the things, but we can't afford it. We can't afford, yeah, but we better not do more than 2.5%. So good work, council. Good work, staff. Well done. So now let's circle back on a couple of line items, and then I think we'll set another meeting because things need to shuffle out. We've got some additional external budgets to deal with. We've got some extra what we'll call Rowley costs, if you will. The Rowley factor. So we can turn to planning and development. That's page 31. We talked about this $50,000 in accessibility. Is that something we want to keep there as a possible community support grant thing, or is that something we want to take out? Go ahead, Councillor, Acting Deputy Mayor.
The $50,000 for the accessibility stuff is what you're talking about?
I am.
I kind of like the CAO's comment around accessibility. Maybe we clean up our own before we clean up downtown. Would 50,000 do anything for what we need to do here in town? Or in buildings that we own?
The reality is that are we fully compliant? The answer is no. Are we getting there? And have we seen a lot of improvements over the course of the last little bit? You bet. And I think we're well on our way in that regard. And each and every year we allocate funding to deal with whatever gaps that we have. So you see that in your capital budget. Again, as the mayor said, do we want to open up the capital budget again? No. Well, my perspective is no. Does $50,000 help? Sure it does, but where's it go? Do you throw it into reserves or whatever? My recommendation is simple. Take care of your own shop and deal with your issues. And if we've got our game plan in place and have all of our facilities fully up to speed, and we get a whole bunch extra money, then we can turn our mind to other people's responsibilities. For now, my recommendation would be to delete the $50,000.
Councillor Wheeldon.
Thank you. My understanding when the Accessibility Committee made this recommendation was that the municipality was taking care of its shop and moving towards compliance on schedule, and that this is how we could help ensure that our residents with disabilities are able to access our entire community. So it's not a matter of that we are somehow taking this from ensuring that our own facilities are fully accessible. It's that we expect that our own facilities are moving towards accessibility. And I know Jessica and Danny have been doing a lot with grants in order to get upgrades to this particular building as well. And our new podium is here. I'm delighted to see that. I know we still have a ways to go on that, but I think that having, again, like the money that we budgeted last year for sustainability that ended up sitting all year, but is now available for, it has become capacity for us to do something this year. I think that it's important that we invest in the accessibility of our community in whatever program our staff are able to put together that can help our entire community to become accessible. Because the reality is that a lot of the things that we would do to make our own facilities compliant are not actually going to be accessed by many of our residents at all. Whereas there are many places in our community that that people would access on a regular basis if they could. So that's the way I see it, and that was the understanding I had when the Accessibility Committee made this recommendation.
Councillor Boutwell.
Thank you, and very, very much, and through you. I tend to agree as well with the CAO that, and I'll just address Councillor Wilton separately through you. Aiding our business community is great. I am a member of that business community. The property that I lease is not fully compliant. In making my renovations, I've budgeted for that, and I do certain things on my own. It is the cost of doing business, and I accept that as a private business owner in this community. I'm wondering if we might, in the future, and perhaps the CAO could comment on this, look at something similar to our private roads grant, and establish something like that for an accessibility grant, maybe a cost matching or up to $1,000 or something like that.
Or is there a community improvement plan we could put in place? CAO?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly where I was going. We've worked long and hard with respect to establishing a community improvement plan. Lots of exciting policies that we've put in place. We just haven't financed it yet. So we've talked about community improvement plans for downtown facade improvement, as an example. We've talked about brownfields. We've talked about affordable housing. But we're up here and we haven't financed the policy yet. So we need to get from up here, drill down with all the different agreements, and then finance the game plan and then start administering it. Laudable policy document, but we've got to get the rubber on the ground. So I would say through a CIP, you may provide that opportunity for accessibility if you so choose, but that's a policy decision that council's got to make.
How do we, well, I guess we decide whether if we keep this money in this budget, we don't need to worry about that. It becomes a separate policy altogether through budget. But should council choose to remove this from the budget, what's the best course of action to ensure that we include that as part of a CIP program?
I think that you ask Mr. Walsh to have a review of the CIP program since day one. Where are we? And get a year to date with respect to what have we done from a policy perspective? How have we moved the yardstick forward or not? And is it time to expand what we have, or is it time to drill down and get on the ground what we said we were going to do versus doing 14 other things? Well, my approach would be, we said we were going to do this, brownfields, affordable housing, downtown facade, let's do it. Before we start turning our mind to expanding it to do this and this, we can say we want to fund 14 different things. But if we haven't got our game plan together, we're just spinning our wheels. So I'm saying, get a recommendation, get a report, a status report from Mr. Walsh. He'll tell you where we are, how we moved the yardsticks or not, and then what do we need to do to drill down. But for now, I wouldn't expand.
Councillor Fredis.
To the chair, so it kind of sounds like perhaps we leave the funding in the budget. We just redesignate it as CIP with the potential to extend it to these accessibility things. Is that kind of what I'm hearing?
I don't think that's what you're hearing. I think you're hearing remove the money from the budget because we don't have the capacity to do it anyway, unless and until we're able to include it into a CIP program. That's what I'm hearing. So I come back to my comments about we can include it in the budget, but we probably won't accomplish much at the end of the day.
I concur, and I think if we include it in the budget and do nothing with it, we've already asked the taxpayer to pay for it. So I would say that we should remove this from the budget. That's the messaging I'm hearing from you as well, CAO. Yeah, so I would agree with your recommendation.
Anyone else? Councillor Wilden?
If we were to come up with a plan in the middle of the year and we had not budgeted anything for this, we would be waiting until the following year in order to implement it. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, certainly, let's just talk about the budget cycle. So the budget cycle in the normal course starts about June, where council gets together with staff and says, here are the guidelines that we want you to move forward for the 2025 budget. And they can include accessibility grant for CIP or whatever else that you want to include. So that's one approach. And the capital budget typically gets approved in about October-ish. And then the staff get their marching orders to get on with it, sort of thing. So that's one approach, the normal budget cycle. A secondary approach is that at any time you can open up the budget. So if you in June or July or whatever come up with this wonderful program and policy directive and you need to finance it, well, you just ask the treasurer or the department head or the CAO, how do I go about financing that? They'll find the money.
Said the guy retiring in March. So I think because it was a recommendation provided by a committee and because council did approve the recommendation, we should probably make a motion to change the budget item. So I've written the committee of whole direct staff to set the accessibility advisory committee budget at $9,664, which would reduce it by 50 grand. And if that's the motion, I'll take a mover. Let's move by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, seconded by Councillor Butwell. Is there any further discussion on this? Those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Sustainability Advisory Committee was the other line item we wanted to talk about, I think. There was I made a note here somewhere, a suggestion to, because we have pivoted away from a coordinator officer staff position to a plan, a climate action plan, the suggestion is to reduce the advisory committee's budget by $65,000. Was that the recommendation I heard?
There's a couple different options that we chatted about. I think my recommendation would be to secure the residual $25,000 from our contingency reserve and reduce your operating budget by $65,000. That gives you some more flexibility on an operating budget perspective.
Councillor Wilden?
That would be if we were hoping to get exactly the same deal as Port Hope. I would like a little bit of padding on that. Can we look for 100,000 total instead of the 90,000, which would mean 10,000 less than what the CAO is saying?
But still drawing it from contingency? So we would still be reducing the committee's budget by 65. And at the end of the day, we're going to get bids out and we're going to see where the numbers fall. If it's more than what we budgeted, we'll find the money. Right. And if it's less than what we budgeted, we go, ooh, we win. Doing math in my head, everybody, so make sure I did it right. The motion would read that the Committee of the Whole direct staff to set the Sustainability Advisory Committee budget at $8,631. So that would be reducing it by 65. Did I do that right? Is there a mover? Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Butwell. Further discussion? Go ahead.
Thank you. I think that what Councillor Wielded was talking about before, and I just wanted to reiterate, was that we had asked for the salary. We got the salary. Now we need the plan. So now we're getting the plan. And I really hope that once we get this plan, there will be the will to actually find the money to perform on that plan on an ongoing basis, ongoing and continuing basis. So it's more of a statement. It's not a question.
And I agree with your statement. The last thing I want is as a plan that we go, oh, that's great, put it on a shelf somewhere. That drives me crazy. So thank you for that. Does staff need direction with regard to the climate action plan? You have that somewhere? Okay. Anything further on the motion? Those in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried. Staff will bring back options with regard to the land banking payments at our next meeting. Do we want to direct staff to review CIP policies and provide a report to council? Is there a reasonable timeline for that, Director Walsh?
Mayor, through council, it should be fairly brief because I think within this existing CIP policy framework, there's a lot to borrow from. Typically, there is a cost matching of the applicant. And council may recall that in our fees and charges bylaw, there is actually a fee for applying for a CIP grant, which inevitably gets returned back to the applicant if they're supported by the program. To give you an exact time frame, I would target March.
So if I said the first meeting in April,
That
would
would be
that give
more than
you lots of
reasonable.
time?
It would. And I'll look at other policy options as well. I know we focused on a CIP, but the thing is the CIP policies may be there to give some flexibility on this. And I would hate to go through an amendment to the official plan that brought in the CIP policy framework because that takes a long time to get finally approved as we have observed, and not through our own mechanism so much as final approval elsewhere. So and there's some technical things in the planning yet, I think, that causes some reluctance for final approval, but in practice, the province is more than happy to condone the CIP policy. So it can possibly be a very brief. I think the original draft did have accessibility matters referenced, so it may be a very short report if that's still the case in the final approval.
We love short reports, Director Walsh.
Okay, I'll try to make it shorter than my speaking habits.
You said it, Director, not me. Committee motion I've drafted reads, the Committee of the Whole directs staff to review the community improvement plan policies and provide a report to council at or before the first regular council meeting in April 2024. Is there a mover? Acting Deputy Mayor, you have something to say? Okay, is there a mover? Councillor Fredis. Seconded by Councillor Wheeldon. Discussion? Discussion? Thought maybe.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I believe I heard Director Walsh say, are we just focusing on the accessibility part of the community improvement plan? Because I know talking months, maybe a couple of years ago, that it would be a whole downtown revitalization.
So this report would be for staff to bring back a report on the CIP program and what's happening. So we could have a more fulsome discussion at that point. Anything further? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Alrighty. Anything else with regard to the 2024 draft budget at this stage? I think the next step is probably to have staff bring back more numbers. Councillor Fredis.
Through the chair, and I know we're just talking operating and we don't want to revisit capital, but I just wanted to remind everybody that we don't appear to have money in the capital budget for cameras for ASE. Can we attend to that somehow?
Mr. Castleman, you'll include that in your update. Thank you. I understand. I have a motion moved by Councillor Fredis, seconded by Councillor Butwell, that the Committee of the Whole recommend Council to approve the 2024 grants and aid requests. Is there any discussion? Councillor Butwell.
Given that there are several of us who have declared interest, could we break out the items? Or is there a need to?
They were broken out before. But
Okay. Nope, I forgot.
Yeah.
It's like more than 24 hours ago. Yeah.
it was a lot more than 24 hours ago, yes. Anything further on the motion? Acting Deputy Mayor?
Weren't there one or two that needed to be reconsidered with the grants and
I don't remember there being any that needed to be reconsidered. I've had some emails on some, and I've had some. That's part of correspondence. Right, so we can defer this to the next meeting, or Councillor Fredis could withdraw his motion and we can have a conversation about it another time. You don't have to, though. I have a mover and a seconder. I've got a signed mover and a seconder, so I'm good.
Through the chair, I've gone through this. I have tick marks on everything that we approved at the last meeting. As far as I'm concerned, I stand by my motion.
Very well. Anything further on the motion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion is carried. All righty. Do we need a motion to receive the report? Madam Clerk, do we need a motion to receive the report? The budget report? No, we're good. Okay, so that brings us to correspondence, direction items, endorsements, communications, and petitions. The first item is funding request for Susan Brose book. I have a motion moved by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley and seconded by Councillor Butwell that the correspondence from Susan Brose request for funding be received. Is there any discussion? Those in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. The next are letters of support of the Rainbow Youth Center grant applications from the congregation of Trinity-St. Andrews United Church. Yeah, I made a non-disqualifying declaration. I have a motion moved by Councillor Butwell, seconded by Acting Deputy Mayor Rowley, that the letters of support of the Rainbow Youth Center grant application from the congregation of Trinity-St. Andrews United Church be received. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Being none opposed, that motion's carried. Brings us to question period. Are there any questions from the two gents in the gallery? Madam Deputy Clerk, is there anyone on Zoom? We have no in-camera session, which brings us to adjournment. It is 7:59, and I adjourn this committee of the whole meeting. We will call another committee of the whole meeting for budget purposes in the coming days, I assume.
I'm hesitating here because I have collective bargaining on the 6th and 7th.
So
So that's.
we will
quote.
call a special council meeting or a committee of the whole meeting for budget purposes. When
Thereafter.
staff have opportunity to put these numbers together, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it might be best to get through collective bargaining. We'll have a real sense of where the dollars and cents are anyway. So stay tuned, everybody. Thank you.